Is this thing on?
Welcome back to the podcast by students for students. I'm Brian Hearn, and today I'm joined by Amanda Strickland as my co-host. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm good. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing well. And joining us today are Adam McGregor, who's a professor and program coordinator in the School of Business at SLC Kingston campus. How are you doing, Adam?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And Deanna Davies, who's a program coordinator, a project management graduate certificate program faculty. God, thank God I got that out. At the School of Business as well. And how are you doing, Deanna?
Hi there. I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
We're really excited to have this on. And today we're going to be talking about some study tips and tricks for exams and finals. But before we get to that, last time I saw you, Deanna, I think it was this summer, and we were talking about the school year coming. How's it been going for you so far?
For the school year, it's been interesting. It's been interesting. It's new for all of us. So, as I often say to a lot of my students, this is like a roller coaster, right? At the beginning, I think all of us, and you get to climbing that hill screaming of terror. And now we're heading into week 10, and I think we're actually starting to enjoy this. It's a new world, and we've all adjusted. So thank you for asking. It's been going really, really well. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel the same kind of way. Adam, how about you? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we're all kind of finding our stride a little bit more and more now, and sort of embracing this as an opportunity to, push our employability skills, become more digitally literate, and it started as a problem in March, and I think it's really blossomed into an opportunity at this point that people are really leaning into. So it's been nice. It's not how I want to work for the rest of my life, certainly, but I think it's been a great opportunity and great learning for me too.
I understand that. I've been feeling the same kind of way. And Amanda, how are you feeling with this so far? Like, how are you feeling coming into the exam season and everything?
I think starting to hit my stride, like getting all that organized. Because I know when we went online last year, it was, okay, what do we do? How do we do this? And I think that experience has helped prepare for this year. And it's like, okay, now we know how this works. We can plan for this. So I think it's been definitely effective to have done it a bit last year coming into this year, especially for preparation for this time of year.
No doubt.
All right, so hopefully we're going to give you guys some good information on studying for finals, especially for those of you in your first year or who haven't had finals yet. So I'm going to ask first the most obvious question. How would you guys recommend students go about studying for finals?
Do you want to go first, Deanna?
Sure. I'm reflecting on this question, and I think it all depends on the student, quite honestly. But there are always some tips and tricks that we can all share that can help to make the journey to the end a little bit easier. And so, I was thinking about this in the sense that, making sure you're planning. Don't wait until the end. Procrastination is a really bad habit to be in, and we've all been there before. So making sure that you're planning, make sure you take time out and little tiny goals along the way of what you absorb. Now, how do you do that? You can write it out, and you can quiz yourself or find a study buddy. Finding that study buddy does seem to help quite a bit, and you get to really verbalize and then also write out as well. But again, space out the practicing. Don't wait until that last week for the practicing. You've got week 10 now. It's coming up, so do a bit of practicing and planning.
Yeah, and I think if I could just pick up where Deanna was talking about having a study buddy, I think, if you sort of treat it like somebody that you go to the gym with, somebody that keeps you accountable, someone that holds you to your goals. And often I would choose somebody that has similar goals to you, who might be a friend, might not be, but I think certainly being accountable to someone other than yourself can be motivating, for me anyways. And then I think probably one of the best pieces of advice that I have ever received is if you treat school like your job and have a 9 to 5 schedule rather than I have class 8:30 to 10:30 and then I'm going to watch Netflix until dinner time, which, have a day like that now and then, of course. But the more you can treat school like your job, I think the better off you're going to be, because you're going to take advantage of those pockets of time during the day to continually be, working and preparing yourself rather than leaving it all to the last minute. Yeah.
if I can jump off of what Adam just said as well, sometimes as you're leading up to the end, you may find in some of your classes there is some allotted time within your schedule class. So I always encourage my students, you're already scheduled for the class, and if you have that opportunity, spend it on that. And you're able to then say, this is part of my schedule already.
Yeah, I've been trying to do that throughout the year, and I find it's really effective. Like the study buddy concept is something that I kind of carried over from last year. I had a couple different groups from my first and second sections that we kind of have some little WhatsApp chat goings, and it's not like necessarily like, oh, did you get this done by this time or anything like that, but there you have the little bit of that ability to kind of like bounce ideas off each other and get, at least gauge where other people are going, so that kind of gives you a barometer of how well you should be pacing yourself, because in this environment, self-pacing is a really big thing. And with that, like, do you really think there's a such thing as starting to prep for something too early? Like, can there be such a thing, or is it smart to really, as you said, just kind of draw it out over the course of the semester?
Yeah,
Adam?
I think if you consider like stress as a vehicle for bettering yourself, I mean, there's such a thing as too much stress. There's such a thing probably as too little stress in terms of motivating. And that's kind of where most people might be right now. Is it's week 10, I've got lots of time to get ready, I don't need to worry about this yet. But the idea would be to sort of head off the concern on the other end of the stress continuum, where I'm paralyzed and unable to accomplish things. And so is there such a thing as starting too early? I would say absolutely not. Is there a challenge to motivating yourself very early in the process? Yeah, I've been there. We've all been there, and I'll probably be there again very soon with something that I have to do, and that's fine. You know, I think, you know, the earlier you can start, the better. Obviously, for obvious reasons. And so, no, it's never too early to start. And I really feel like the studying, in the traditional sense of I have a test Friday, so I need to start Monday, is sort of backwards thinking, because knowing you have a test in week 5 and starting studying after your first class in week 1 is the best way, you know, which is, you know, proven with research, to actually be the most prepared you can be for that test in week 4. And so to that end, you know, if it's thinking about it as I need to study for my final versus I need to review course content on an ongoing basis, if we can sort of flip the script to the extent possible in each person's head, I think that's going to leave you better prepared for that final exam.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I want to just, I agree with you as well, Adam. And, you know, I'm really not a fan of cramming it all in. And we do know it does happen. But, you know, I'm a huge fan, as both of you probably already know, of post notes. And I keep them with me all the time. And I often recommend to my students, you know, at the beginning, you know where everything is due. And so as you're doing your reading, and now in this online environment, it's hard because you may not have a physical textbook or your article printed out, but you can use your post notes. And so what I recommend from the beginning is to continue to learn and just take down the notes on that post note, summarize that chapter. That way, when you get to your finals, you're not going back to one and rereading everything. You've already captured it. And it's pretty cool. And especially even at the end, if you have reflective papers that are due, you literally can take your post notes and just pile them one after another. And there's your reflection framework ready for you. So, you know, I think that there are a lot of different things that you can be doing to prepare yourself. You know it's coming. And so that planning process, again, like Adam said, it's easier said than done in some situations, but it is very important.
I think that's a perfect segue into our next question for the use of cue cards. I know that's a really popular method of studying. So how effective do you find those? And do you have any other information memorization techniques that you find to be useful or helpful?
Do you want to start with that one, Adam, or do you want me to?
You go ahead. I'm probably not the best example for cue.
I love cue cards. And I often say, you know, I think, you know, from the time we're really little, we do practice. Remember doing, you know, our multiplications with cue cards. So I'm a huge fan of cue cards and memorization. Wow, that's a tough one. You know, I'm not that great as sometimes I feel like I'm Dory. But, you know, I truly believe that you need to absorb the content That's how you start to memorize it. When you can appreciate the application of the project, that makes a huge difference, or the content, projects in my head. That's a huge difference in your knowledge, and you will retain it that much more. So practice and drill the whole way along, rather than just reading and memorization. But again, I think every subject is different.
Yeah, I sort of take issue with the idea of memorization as a goal of learning anyways, on a fundamental level. I mean, that's not what that doesn't mean you're going to know it a year from now. And so if we can begin to contextualize and synthesize the things that you're supposed to memorize, I think in effect you're learning them, and therefore have memorized them. But the commitment to memory as a process is certainly part of some people's learning journey. But for me, I just that's not sort of what learning is for me. And so I can completely appreciate that in some instances that's what you have to do to get through a class, get through a concept, and so on and so forth. Big things for me, I wasn't a cue card person. I kind of might have seemed a bit strange, but the best way for me to learn was a quiet space for me to talk out loud. And so often it would be myself and someone in the same class, and we would explain concepts to each other. And that was, if I could teach it to somebody, I knew that I knew it. And that's sort of what was a barometer for me as to whether I was ready or prepared or had memorized a concept, was if I could explain it clearly to someone else, that I felt like I was in a great position to head into that exam or that test. And so, sometimes I would use cue cards if other people had made them. I found for me personally that wasn't my best way to learn. So that said, everyone's going to have their own best ways. Cue cards are great for some people, but if you're hearing the words cue cards and saying that's not for me, know that I got through it without them too, so it's possible.
Yeah,
for sure.
Just to dive off of that, the other thing that often would work for me, and it's funny, the memorization would be that name association. And that would be more of that creative brain in me. And if I knew I had to memorize a certain formula, it would be that name association and creating acronyms. And that was a great memory technique that I would use.
Yeah, I think you guys have both highlighted some really interesting techniques. What you described, Adam, it's interesting. I remember reading Richard Feynman's autobiography, and he basically explained that that's how he did things. He broke it down to a level of comprehension where basically you don't have to use any specific jargon. You can explain to a 5-year-old, and if you get to that level of comprehension, you truly understand the subject. So it's kind of interesting that you go about that same way, because I try to do the same thing, and honestly, one way I go about that is, like, I say it out loud, but I try to make it into a little bit of a game. So, kind of setting check marks and making it so that it's like an achievable process and you're getting a tangible result from it. Like, do you guys, Deanna, do you have any suggestions for kind of making studying or learning more fun or enjoyable?
First of all, sleep. I always tend to enjoy something a little bit more when I've had a good night's sleep and or a few good night's sleeps, and it's not always so easy as you're approaching finals. But definitely, the acronyms and the name association is really helpful, and sometimes even creating a song, because again, it's part of that repetition the whole time. So I think, from a fun perspective, that's really what I would do.
I like it. Adam, do you have any thoughts?
I had one, and I'm just losing my train of thought here, but I liked it. I sort of got stuck in that idea of the song because it brought me back to 3 a.m. studying in a library, trying to memorize a finance formula to the tune of Old MacDonald. So that, it's, I don't remember it, but I can hum it and picture the location and so on. But I think for me, one of the best things you can maybe do to have fun with studying is to sort of remember why you're there, and sort of, you're here because you're excited about a program. This is an opportunity for learning and bettering yourself and furthering yourself. And if you can sort of throw the pressure, and I know this is very easy for me to say because I'm not writing the test, but throw the pressure, the idea of that test being, a marker of your learning, and instead embrace it as an opportunity to showcase all of the hard work that you've done that semester. I think, if you can lean into the excitement and the joy you had for your course of study, instead of focusing on the pressures of the test, I think that's, going to serve you better. And again, I know that's easy for me to say, and I know that's going to be impossible to remember or keep in mind at 3 a.m. the night before something, but, if that can ever serve as a guiding light for you, I would encourage you to sort of, take a step back, step outside of the box that you're in, focus on the test. And, this is an opportunity for you to better yourself. It's a step for you on your career journey. And it really is an opportunity to highlight and showcase the hard work that you've done through a semester, rather than a, punitive measure of your knowledge at that time. And again, easy for me to say. I completely appreciate that you could be laughing at me right now, but that's fine too.
I feel exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. I know you both mentioned getting sleep and doing the 3 a.m. cram session. So now you all know that even your professors aren't outside of that late night cram session before something. I know I've been there multiple times. Outside of coffee or energy drinks, how would you recommend keeping going in those late night cram sessions if they are unavoidable?
Yeah, I keep going until you hit a point of diminishing returns. And you need to be aware of that, whatever that is. There's a threshold where every hour or every minute you're awake is actually a detriment to your ability to write that test the next morning. And so there needs to be a time where you just close the book and say, I'm not absorbing anything. I can't possibly, digest another paragraph of information. I have to just do the best I can with what I have right now. And that's fine sometimes. One other thing I'd recommend is to walk away from the book, which might seem like a waste of time and the hardest thing to do at 3 a.m. when you're already, up against the deadline. But go for a walk, get some fresh air, refocus yourself is another strategy I would actively encourage you to do.
Yeah, I would agree with Adam there. You have to have that self-awareness piece. You need to know at what point am I not absorbing this? And you need to know that you have to have the sleep in order to retain and allow your body to absorb what you have been putting it through during that whole study period. Taking the physical breaks, getting fresh air, so important. And it's so easy for you to forget to do that. And fueling yourself, having water with you at all times, fueling your brain, fueling your energy as well. So making sure that you're getting that physical outlet, walking, something like that to take that break for sure.
Yeah. There comes a point where a C with the knowledge that you have is better than a worse mark with, the lack of sleep and the lack of brain function you're creating for yourself. And that sort of, you need to keep that in mind. So anyways, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely found that it's hard to do, but I know what you mean. Walking away and kind of giving yourself that chance to really giving your brain a chance to kind of compile the information you've had and actually put it in a proper spot. And essentially you guys talk about that. So one thing I've learned is there's a big difference between studying for the test and learning information. Adam, can you kind of highlight some of the differences between that for some people?
With an example? Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if I look back at my university transcript, I'll see a class with an A and the course title and not be able to tell you what happened in that class. And that's an example of you did really well on a test, but was the lifelong learning that obviously should be the goal there. And sort of, that's as much my fault, I would argue, as the class itself, because was I the person that went home after every class and sort of consolidated my notes and made it learning, not memorization? I'll own that a little bit as well. But certainly, I think in how you approach your schoolwork, the concept here and what the college is trying to impart you with is knowledge for a career journey, and ultimately it's up to the student as much as it is up to me. And I hope that I'm designing courses with the Adam McGregors of the student world in mind. But you've got to sort of take ownership over your learning and make it a goal of your journey, not to do well on a test, but to absorb and to retain and to learn. So yes, there's a difference. You can do really well on a test, and if I gave you that same test a week later, fail it. And that was obviously not, good learning. And so as much as I would encourage my colleagues to consider, how we design our courses and deadlines and due dates and so on to scaffold and structure for deep learning and understanding versus memorization, I think that students can also own part of this and make it their goal to learn rather than their goal to perform on a test.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have I've definitely done both, and this year I've really been trying to make a more concerted effort to actually retain the information. And like, one of the biggest things I've been finding helping is placing the information and like how I will view it as important in my future going forward. Because some of these things, obviously, it is like almost a deferred gain from it. So being able to place that in a way of like, you know, I might be able to use this down the road, or this could lead to a different path I'm not really examining right now. And looking at it that way instead of, oh, I need to get this good grade, I think that really, really helps. Deanna, do you have any thoughts on this, or?
Yeah, you know, and looking at it like an investment. You've invested in your education, and taking that mature lens of knowing, how can I apply this to my future? If I'm only memorizing it for that one particular test, as Adam says, you can go back and say, sure, it looked like an A, but I have no idea what happened in that class. And we've all been there. But if, you know, from the beginning, if you can look at it with a very different lens of saying, what can I get out of this class for me? That's back to the what's in it for me. And that's not selfish. That's actually protecting your investment in education. And when you can absorb it and apply it to something that is real to you, it makes such a difference, rather than worrying about the end and having to memorize to cram it just to pass that test.
Yeah, and Bryan, I really like what you said there, and I would encourage all students to hold faculty accountable to say, why is this relevant? What does it mean? Because that's ultimately what our job is. And I love when I get questions like that. Okay, you taught this, Adam, but why does it matter? And that's going to help you to understand, you know, why it's important, and possibly, you know, encourage you to spend more time on something that you might not have. And so, you know, if you ever want to know the answer to that question, ask is something I would really encourage you to do. And with respect to education being an investment, I'd like to touch on that again too, that, you know, it's not just the price of tuition that it's cost you to be in school this year. It's the salary that you've foregone, and the opportunity cost that's associated with it. And even working at a minimum wage job, you know, you would have been making somewhere between $30,000 and $35,000 this year. So it's not just that you paid X number of dollars in tuition, it's that you sacrificed $30,000 to $35,000 in potential income. And so the investment into schooling that everyone has made is significant, and it's up to you to an extent to make sure that you're getting a return on that investment. And, you know, it's as much as sometimes, you know, you might be distracted by social life, entertainment, and whatnot, and of course we all are, were, and continue to be, keeping that in mind, and it can really help you to stay focused.
Yeah, I definitely like the point that you made about asking your professor, you know, why is this relevant to me? Because I know in high school, when we didn't have like that kind of narrowed field of what we were studying for our futures, in one of my math classes, we were learning a concept, and my teacher went around and asked each of us what we were doing for our post-secondary, and only one person needed the concept we were learning for post-secondary, and he was going into engineering. So I think that's definitely really important to know, like, why you're studying this. And I know coming out of high school, you're getting a lot more information that's more relevant to you, and sometimes that can be like a little bit of an information overload at times. So do you have any advice for students who are feeling like they're just having so much information piled on them and are daunted by like the amount of work that they have to complete?
You can go first if you want, Deanna.
Okay. I apologize. The sun keeps coming out, so it's changing my lighting behind me.
I've been watching that whole battle. It's hilarious.
You know, Amanda, you know, that overwhelming feeling, you know, is very normal. And, you know, regardless of whether you're a student or whether you're even in your full-time career, we all experience that at some point. And, you know, I'm a huge fan of emotional intelligence and understanding that self-awareness piece and what works for you. And so, you know, having that ability to stop and pause and know we don't need to rifle through something, stop, pause, and reflect. And when you have that opportunity to do it, as some of you may remember, you know, I always say, climb to the top of the ladder, take a look at what options you have. You can't do that if you're running hard on the treadmill. So make sure that you take that time to pause and reflect and to plan what your next steps are going to be. It's all strategy really, but it's strategy for you. Find out where that energy is for you, and can you tackle small things first? So that's off the plate. Or do you want to tackle the big one that's making you lose sleep? Get that one out of the way and then move forward. So it's individual for sure, but it's having that self-awareness, what works for me.
Yeah, I think, milestoning things, right? Rather than say I have to write a 10,000 word something, it's I have to write an introduction today, and I have to write, the abstract tomorrow, and so on, whatever it is, compartmentalizing things and chunking it out. And I think, as Deanna mentioned, being able to see the forest through the trees, and being able to step back and create priorities and accomplishable list of tasks for a day. If you've got 35 hours of something to do in a 24-hour day, it's not going to happen. So cut and focus, right? I think, I feel overwhelmed on an almost daily basis, as most people tend to, especially during this time, but it's a matter of sort of chunking things up. What can I, how much time do I have today? What has to be accomplished? What would be nice to be accomplished? And then creating a schedule. And then after you've done that, let the rest go, because you're not going to solve the world's problems today. And this is what you can accomplish. And that it gives you a feeling that you've actually got something done, rather than I've still got so much more to do. Celebrate the little things is another big thing. If you get something done, give yourself a pat on the back, eat some ice cream, I don't know, do what you got to do to sort of celebrate that, because little wins are little wins and they deserve to be celebrated. So
yeah. And if I can add to that as well, your semester, look at it like a marathon. And as you are thinking about that end, and when you become overwhelmed, you have to reflect too, have I eaten? What have I eaten? Have I drank water? Those are the kind of things. Have you fueled your body and your brain enough to be able to sustain what you need to accomplish in the end? And I know that sounds easier said than done in some days, but when we have that opportunity to push pause, we can say, how have I actually fueled myself? If we were going in a car, you would stop and get some fuel. So look at your body like the vessel that's getting you to the end, and that's your mind, your body, and your soul too. So it's really, really important that you are fueling yourself.
Yeah, and on that note, I can still remember, studying till 5:30 in the morning, setting an alarm for 7:45 to get into my clothes and run to campus to write an exam. And, an hour and a half into a 3.5-hour exam, having not eaten anything and subsisted on caffeine for the 12 hours prior, like I hit a wall that was just awful, and I never wanted to do that again. So if you're going to study through the night, give yourself an hour before you actually need to do that test, that exam. Have a shower, first of all, for you and for everyone around you, and then eat something healthy. So you're actually going to have the, as Deanna mentioned, the energy to actually push your and get the most out of the studying that you did. So there's strategies to being a bad studier, like some of us tend to be sometimes, that can help you still to be your best. Yeah.
I think you guys touched on a lot of things that I've been trying to do recently. I'm an older student, so I have had the benefit of being able to figure things out in life. But yeah, like having some semblance of a healthy diet and stuff helps. But honestly, taking that time for yourself, I find is critical too. Like, giving yourself an hour to listen to your favorite podcast, or, to read a book, or just like go for a walk. Like these kind of things, as Deanna said, you have to refill your soul as well as your body, right? And if you're not giving yourself those little moments, or acknowledging those little wins, as you're talking about, Adam, you're not going to have the energy to fight up that big mountain. So you have to give yourself the time, and which is obviously something we're all in crunch with now, going into the end of the exam season. So how do finals differ from exams in high school, and how are they the same?
I think, if I think back to when I first wrote my first exams in university some time ago now, but it was just the stress and the perception of the exam being, directly tied to your career and your, the stakes seemed higher. But when you sort of step back and sort of analyze it, you're preparing for some sort of cumulative or non-cumulative assessment of the knowledge that you've retained through a semester. And ultimately, it's just a possibly bigger version of what you already did in high school. You know, it's natural to feel more intimidated by it, and that's completely normal and okay. But it's the same thing. It's just a test. You know, if you can step back and just tell you it's just a test. You know, a B here or an A here or a C here is not going to make, you know, a world of difference. Obviously, grades are important. Passing classes are super important. But, you know, if you can sort of, and it's, again, easy for me to say, removing the stress of the test and the anxiety of the test lets you focus on the task a lot more. And so is it the same? Is it different? Yes and no is unfortunately the answer I'm going to give. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Deanna?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Adam. And it's funny, I was reflecting and I can remember having a conversation with one of my professors and saying, can we stop calling it a test? And she would say to me, what do you say? I said, because the word test stresses me out. And so I said, can we call it something else, like major assignment or big assignment? And so I think how you reframe it is really important. And the difference in my mind is your level of maturity. When you in high school, you didn't have that ability, some of us, or that knowledge. You have so much knowledge now. And so I think it's how you reframe it and how you look at and how you actually get organized as you lead into that, whether it's a final test or a final assignment. Break it down, like Adam said, break it down all the way through. And then that way at the end, it doesn't seem so big.
Yeah, this is an opportunity for you to show how great you are, not a punitive measure of, you know, your knowledge. And if you can kind of tell yourself that, whether it's true or not, I think it is true. But, you know, if you can psych yourself up in that way, that I'm going to show this person marking this test how much I learned and how much I accomplished and how capable I am, versus, oh gosh, they're going to try and fool me and they want me to do better. Nobody wants you to do poorly. I think that's a really important thing to understand. Nobody's writing a test at home, so I hope anyways, but you know, how am I going to trick them and how can I make people, well, nobody got into this job because they want to see you do poorly. And so, you know, it's not meant to be scary if you've been putting in the work that you're supposed to. It's just an opportunity for you to showcase all the hard work that you've done and all the knowledge that you now have to somebody who's going to be very proud of you.
I think that's some really good advice to reframe it and kind of take the stress out of it being a be-all, end-all exam kind of thing. And from your experience as professors, what are some things about exams that you find students stress about the most? And what are some of your recommendations for kind of stress relievers for those?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know. What do you stress about the most as a current student?
I would say it's probably kind of that be all end all, like it counts for the majority of the grades for the assignment, and kind of remembering the stuff from the beginning, like the stuff towards the end, it's more fresh in your mind. Then you have to go back and refresh. Okay, what did we learn like 6 weeks ago that's going to be on this exam, and kind of making sure like everything is fresh in your mind for that day.
I guess, I mean, if I can offer the perspective, grades matter, especially if you know, are wanting to pursue further education. That's not going to go away. Your GPA matters in certain areas, but I can tell you with full and complete disclosure, I've never been asked what I got on an accounting test in second year university by an employer. So yes, it matters. Yes, you need to know. Yes, it's important. Yes, your final grade matters, and it all contributes to the bigger picture. But you know, no one's in a job interview deciding between Bryan and Amanda and saying, well, Bryan got a 75 and Amanda got a 72. So I think we've got our decision made. So you know, the academic presentation, the presentation of your academic knowledge in the form of a grade is just one piece of the whole picture that you are developing as a student at St. Lawrence or wherever you are right now. And so what you should be focused on is your complete growth as a person, as an employable human being headed off into the job market. And you know, a 75 versus a 72 on this final test is not going to be the thing that decides whether you're getting a job or not. Ultimately, yes, grades matter. Ultimately, you want to do your best. You want to be able to present, you know, a successful academic career. But, you know, at the end of the day, try and just remove some of that pressure from yourself to the extent you can.
If I had emotions here and could be clapping, I am clapping. I could not agree more, Adam. Well said. And one of the other things that I can remember, also, some students would get so riled up that they would actually forget the information that they knew. And so one of the things that I have always encouraged students when it came to tests or came to exams is put down what you know.
Yeah.
Never leave anything blank. Explain it, because sometimes we get there and we all know it's our nerves or it's our heart rate, and we just can't remember. So put down what you do remember. So again, make sure that you're just never leave anything blank on there. I've never met a colleague, nor have I ever said, no, that's absolutely wrong. I want to know what you're thinking, how you're thinking. Because again, not everybody will remember the exact term. And quite honestly, often we'll get out and you're in the working world and you don't even use that term. But the fact that you know it and you know the concept, or you know the fundamental value of it, speaks volumes.
Yeah, I think, how I approach marking tests, and I hope others do, is how can I give you marks, not how can I take them away. And so even if you're writing, I ask a question and you say, I remember it was a Tuesday, I was sitting in the middle of the class, this was the example you gave, but I cannot tell you for the life of me exactly what it was. I might send you an email and say, come see me in my office. With the pressure removed, with the stakes, not being as high. Do you remember now? Oh, you do? Perfect. Let me give you the marks, right? So, I think the other thing to remember is that everyone's here that's working at this college to help you find your success. And so, to what Deanna said, write down whatever you remember in that area, because you don't know who the person marking it is going to be able to find or help you with or support you and so on. So, we're all here to help you be your best, and a test is just a test.
And we're all human.
Yeah.
Nobody is perfect.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure about that one. So we busted the myth that everyone's perfect. We busted the myth that teachers are trying. That's true. It's true. We busted the myth that teachers are trying to take marks away. I'm pretty sure when in doubt, B is not always right. But what are some myths about exam finals that you can help us with? Like, what are some little tips you can pass on?
I'm gonna need to think for a minute.
I think I do too.
Play the Jeopardy music in the background.
Yeah. Do I get a buzzer?
Yeah, of course. Oh, we'll have to add in some graphics.
I'm going to go back to nobody is perfect. And I think that, making sure that you keep it human. If you can't think of a word or can't think of a full definition, define it in your way. Okay. Do the best that you can on that test. For goodness sakes, also, if there are bonus questions, don't leave them. They're usually the low-lying fruit, so go and do them right away. Get them out of the way, because eventually they're going to catch up with you, and you may really need those. So again, don't leave anything blank. Always put down your thoughts, and don't be afraid to take a risk.
I don't know. I don't know if this is a myth per se, but I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made was comparing myself to other people instead of focusing on being my best self. And a 75 for me might be a fantastic grade, and somebody else might have studied for 5 minutes and beat me. But the fallacy of comparing yourself to another person in that regard is something that is going to just weigh on you. And I think, if you admire the way that somebody can show up cool as a cucumber and do really well on a test, ask them how. I think there's so much to be learned from your colleagues and from how your fellow classmates study, and whether you follow their model to precisely how they did, or you pick up something that's going to work for you. I think one of the myths is that every student is the same and capable of the same, and perfection is the enemy of good, and be your best self. And if you can walk out of a test saying that's the best I could have done, then that's all anyone's ever asking of you. So don't end up comparing yourself to someone who's naturally gifted or whatever it happens to be. If you can honestly say that your attempt was the best that you could offer, then you can sleep easy at night.
Yeah, I know I personally find myself sometimes comparing myself to other people's standards. And I really like your advice for finding out like what works for them and kind of blending in with what works for you. Before we sign off, do you have any stories from your time in college, from your final season, that you can remember that you'd like to pass on to the students going into theirs?
Sure. I don't know.
Sure.
Do I have stories? I have lots of stories.
That you can tell, Adam.
Yeah, that we can tell, unfortunately.
I don't know. It seems, again, like I have the privilege of saying this in hindsight, but some of the best memories I have are the laps that you have at 3:30 in the morning, the stories that you share, having a pizza brought at 2 a.m. when you're still sitting in the student center trying to pack away information. I think, the bonding and the friendships that can happen here in the hardest of times, right? The misery loves company, and for some of us, the struggle of studying is an opportunity to form some of the closest relationships that you might be able to. And I know the challenge of this year presents difficulties with studying in a group or what have you, but the spend some time on teams, working with your colleagues. I think it's again a privilege of mine to be able to say this after the fact, but I can look back on the insanely stressful late nights and early mornings with fondness now, and I hope that many of you will be able to do the same eventually.
So yeah, interesting. I was thinking back, and I'm going to touch back on something that Adam said, and he mentioned about it doesn't really matter what the grade is. And when I reflect back as a student, I look back at some of the circumstances that may have been surrounding me. I was not a straight A student. So that is really important. And when I reflect back, did I know the content? Yes, I knew the content. Was I great at tests? Absolutely not. I actually really was awful. I tried so hard, but I was not good at tests. But I knew the content. And so taking advantage of knowing where your strengths are, how do you get the best education you can? The test is not the be all and end all. It does not define you. And so knowing who you are and what you can take away from that, and knowing that there is going to be a tomorrow, there is going to be another year, and there will be a time where you'll be able to share your knowledge in your way, not just defined by that final test. So I think that's one thing that was a huge takeaway for me. And those late nights of eating craft dinner from, because that's all we could afford, right? At the time as a student. So I would have craft dinner, before, during, after, and enjoying the journey, and not to put so much pressure on yourself.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't test terribly, but I don't test well. So for myself, I try to focus on like the writing assignments or the projects or things, like the things that I have the ability to kind of use more of my research abilities and communication stuff. And then if my test marks are lower, it's fine because I'm doing the best I can. And honestly, taking advantage of extracurriculars, as we talked about, marks aren't the be all and end all. Doing other things in school, those really show up. So, if you can take some time and get involved, don't worry as much about test season because there's other things you can be doing to burnish your resume and make yourself look good, right? Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts, Amanda?
Yeah, I think it's what you said is really important, not just focusing on like the grades, but also how you can enrich your experience, because you're only here for a limited time. And when you look back, you're not going to remember the test. You're going to remember the connections that you made, the activities that you've done. And I think that's a really important factor in being able to enjoy your experience at college for sure. So I want to thank Adam and Deanna for joining us. I hope you all got some valuable advice from them. I know I did. And we're wishing you all the best with your exam seasons. Your professors are rooting for you. And don't be afraid to reach out to them if you want any tips or tricks, or if you want to clarify something, because that's what they're there for. They're there to help you and help you to succeed. So best of luck, everyone, and we will see you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.